Hello, DawgNation. Happy Tuesday to you. My name is Brandon Adams, the host of DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans. I am so glad you're with us today. We'll talk more about our DawgNation appreciation coming up on Thursday, March 15th. I think we may be close to a couple more surprises when it comes to the big event coming up then. We'll tell you about that as I can. I don't have the details ready for that right now. But Jeff Sintel also here on a Tuesday. A lot of recruiting stuff to get into, and I guess in a roundabout way, you could say that what almost seems like bad news for Georgia recruiting. I'm going to tell you why it's not and why there's no need to worry, at least from my perspective. We'll kind of do it all. We'll also start with a little bit of fun from Alabama at the expense of Georgia and why that's also potentially maybe something Georgia can use to its advantage. We'll kind of talk about it all here on this very busy Tuesday as DawgNation Daily begins right now.
Presented by DawgNation.com, this is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans. Here's your host, Brandon Adams.
My, oh my, is Alabama having some fun at Georgia's expense here. The reigning national champions don't seem to want to forget about that and don't seem to want to let anybody else forget about that either. We talked about this briefly on SEC Country Live yesterday afternoon, of course, 3 p.m. Eastern Time on the SEC Country Facebook page. Yesterday was February 26th, or 2/26, and I guess the folks at Alabama have decided to kind of turn this into something of a holiday here. If you're watching on video, I'll show you the tweet. If you're listening on the radio or in podcast form, I'll kind of walk you through it here. It's the official Twitter account from Alabama Compliance. It's at Bama Compliance on Twitter. They said happy 2/26, as in second 26. Hashtag Roll Tide Alabama there. Morgan Moriarty, who's a college football reporter, saw this tweet on Twitter and said, Alabama's out there declaring national holidays. And then the folks from Alabama Compliance then responded back to her with a simple tweet that just said the hashtag it just means more. So Alabama having some fun with this. The touchdown pass that Tua Tagovailoa threw in the national championship game to Devontae Smith was on second 26, so they're going to say, hey, 2/26 is now their holiday. Now, I would have thought that maybe second and 26 was in reference to the fact that for a lot of Alabama fans, their second year of 10th grade happened when they were 26. I would have thought that might be kind of what was going on there, but nonetheless, I guess they're going to say second 26 for the national championship game. Even Nick Saban himself kind of got in the mix on this. He was doing some sort of like promotional event for some of the Mercedes-Benz dealerships that he owns, and AL.com, some other reporters there on hand, and he wasn't referencing the 2/26 date, but he was certainly joking about the Tua Tagovailoa touchdown pass. Here was Nick Saban kind of rubbing some more salt in wounds here.
How it happened was I asked Tua after the game, I said, why did you take a sack when we needed a field goal to stay in the game? And he said, we just needed more room to throw the ball. So that's how it happened. That's pretty funny.
So even Nick Saban's got jokes, I guess, when it comes to Georgia's expense on the national championship game. And, you're sort of left with the response as a Georgia fan here of, well, what are you supposed to do with all of this? And I think first and foremost, the thing that you do is you just sort of laugh it off. I mean, honestly, here on DawgNation Daily and on my other show, SEC Country Live, for the most part, we sort of endorse sort of good-natured ribbing back and forth between fan bases. And even though this is at the expense of Georgia, I don't think it's, the kind of thing that you ought to get really all that mad about. I mean, yeah, I guess it's a little irritating to have to think back to that game once again, but it's not something to be all that irritated about. But more than anything else, though, and the reason why I bring it up here on the show today is because I do think it's another reminder for Georgia in particular. I'm talking about the coaches and players here, not the fan base for a moment, but for the coaches and players to get focused on the opportunity that lies ahead for them in 2018. The chance to get a measure of revenge, the same way that revenge kind of dominated the theme of discussion for 2017, going out and beating all the teams that had beaten Georgia in 2016, and then getting the revenge against Auburn in the SEC championship game in December. I mean, maybe there's a measure of that also exists for Georgia in 2018 against Alabama. Staying focused and hungry to be back in the SEC championship game in the hope that Georgia can get that rematch with Alabama and then get some sort of retribution for second 26 or anything that happened in that game back this past year. I think there is a degree to which that can be a source of motivation for Georgia here in 2018. And it's motivation that exists not just when Georgia plays Alabama, but also the motivation that can exist to actually get Georgia back in that spot. I mean, listen, when we get to July and August here on DawgNation Daily, I can promise you we're going to be talking about own the East once again. You know, we're not going to look ahead to December and August. We're going to look at September, October, November, and games against South Carolina and Florida and Tennessee and the other teams from the SEC East, and, you know, the Auburn game to the extent that also kind of weighs into that discussion, saying in order for Georgia to get that rematch and get that revenge against Alabama, you got to knock off your SEC East competition here first. You got to take care of that business. You've got to own the East again to have your chance at Revenge Tour 2.0 when it comes to Alabama. But if Georgia does get to that spot, I think that you will see a Georgia program that's awful focused and awful ready to sort of prove that the near miss of 2017 is not the moment that's going to define Georgia as a program. That's actually the stepping stone towards the greater success that could come in 2018, 2019. You know who seems to agree with me on that? Georgia coach Kirby Smart, because after that game against Alabama back in January, obviously in the midst of acknowledging what had been great careers for a lot of the seniors that brought Georgia to that point, Kirby Smart, I think, gave a message to Dog fans about what the future is going to be like, and it maybe sort of resounds out as a warning to programs like Alabama. Here's Kirby Smart from back in January.
You know, I can't say enough about the remarkable senior class. These two young men sitting next to me, they meant more to Georgia than yards. A lot of heart and soul, a lot of fire. Sonny Michel came over and talked to the group several times during the game, inspired those guys. But in overtime, we didn't finish when we had to, and Alabama did. And to give them credit, but I think everybody can see that Georgia's going to be a force to be reckoned with. I'm very proud of this team and this university, and we're not going anywhere.
Listen, I can tell you right now that I love everything about that quote. Georgia came up a little bit short. Alabama didn't. You said Kirby Smart says you got to give him credit for that, and that's true. I mean, Tua made a clutch throw. Devontae Smith made a big-time play to get open and be able to catch that. You know, you want to celebrate the second 26 thing on 226 if you're Alabama, that's all fine and well. I guess that's the right that you earn. To the victor goes the spoil, so to speak. And as Kirby Smart said, when it comes to January of 2018, the only thing that Georgia fans can do is just give a little credit to Alabama, who for this particular year is going to be the reigning national champion. But I also like what Kirby Smart says in the rest of that statement. We've played it a couple times here over the last few weeks here on DawgNation Daily, and it's an important reminder from time to time that Georgia is still going to be a force to be reckoned with no matter what, and Georgia's not going anywhere. So, yeah, a part of college football and Alabama history, the Tua pass, that may be distant history, though, the more Georgia goes to work in building its program the way that we think it is, starting on the field this season, and a recruiting class is coming up over the next couple of years. And honestly, another reason to sort of bring this up as a topic here on DawgNation Daily is because I think having something like this to strive towards for Georgia is a really good thing. Having a potential arch nemesis like Alabama, if that's what this is really growing into for Georgia. I don't mean most hated rival. That's still going to be Florida, at least from our perspective here on DawgNation Daily. But in terms of a foe, in terms of a challenger, in terms of a force and source of motivation, if Alabama truly does become that, all of a sudden, that just makes it more likely that Georgia's going to batten down all the hatches to be as good as it can be because of the comparison that could be going on between these two programs. As good as Alabama has been is as good as Georgia wants to be going forward. Someone who understands that is the former Georgia running back Nick Chubb, who, by the way, is going to be with us for our DawgNation Appreciation event on Thursday, March 15th. Maybe on that night, we'll get into some of this with him more there then. But back during the beginning of the month in California for the Rose Bowl, with the thought of Alabama being in the college football playoff, one of the Oklahoma reporters who was there covering the game asked Nick Chubb, hey, do you guys think because you're the reigning SEC champions now, you somehow passed up Alabama? You're better than Alabama. And Chubb, even though this question may have been kind of designed to sort of create a clever headline here, or some interesting fodder and content, Chubb was wise with his answer, and it's also a pretty good addendum to what we're saying here today. Here is Nick Chubb.
Alabama's a great team, so that's a great comparison. But we have ways to go. We can't look at just one season as anything because Alabama's doing it for consecutive years. We hope to get to that level.
Yeah, listen, I like that from Nick Chubb, and it's also very appropriate to mention in the context of what we were just discussing before. Georgia wouldn't have been passing up Alabama as a program if it had won in January. That doesn't happen over the course of one season. But conversely, Georgia's not inferior to Alabama, at least the Kirby Smart version of this program, on the basis of just one season either. So the loss at the end of the 2017 season, I don't think changes the direction for the Georgia program whatsoever. This is the kind of story, as Nick Chubb just told us, It's going to be told over the course of years. And there are going to be some losses like the one that Georgia suffered in January that Dog fans are still smarting over. And there are going to be some wins here as well as Georgia fights and claws its way towards the top. It's going to be a fun ride to watch. It's not all going to unfold in the predictable fashion, and it may not always all unfold the way that Georgia fans want it to. But ultimately, I do think Georgia's heading for some really positive times, and there's better days ahead. And the motivation that comes from losing to Alabama back in January may be part of the fuel that actually gets Georgia there. As we said back in during the 2017 season, the idea of revenge and getting retribution against teams that had beaten Georgia in 2016 was pretty good fuel for the Dogs. And the notion of a revenge tour 2.0 in 2018, that's a pretty good ring to it as well. My name is Brandon Adams. This is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans. Thank you so much for being with us. Whether you watch us on Facebook Live at 10 a.m. on the DawgNation Facebook page, you listen to us on the radio at noon on Athens Sports Radio 960 The Ref, or you check us out in podcast form. And I do truly believe that I can now say with confidence, available wherever podcasts can be found. Because one of the things we've talked about over the last couple of days is the idea of, who listens on Apple Podcasts, who listens on the Android devices, maybe via Google Play or another app there for Android. And I've heard from so many of you that have said, listen, I'm listening on Android devices every day. I'm not having a problem with DawgNation Daily whatsoever. And I'm really happy to hear that. That's really good to hear. We just continue to want to try to make DawgNation Daily as easy to find as we possibly can. We're glad you have found DawgNation Daily, however you have found us, whether it be video, radio, podcast, sort of anything in between. We're just glad you're here with us for DawgNation Daily. And we hope that you'll make plans to join us as well for the biggest event in the history of our show and the biggest event in the history of our website, DawgNation.com. It comes up at the Coca-Cola Roxy Theater on Thursday, March 15th. Our special guests, Nick Chubb, who we just talked about, Sony Michelle, Roquan Smith, they are going to be with us in the building that night. For some of you signing autographs, for some of you taking pictures, for all of us, a chance to see them on stage telling some of the great stories of the miraculous run for Georgia into the college football playoff in just year 2 for Kirby Smart, one of the most special seasons in Georgia history. We're going to celebrate it. We're going to remember it, commemorate it, all on that night, Thursday, March 15th, at the Coca-Cola Roxy Theater for our DawgNation appreciation. Many of you are still trying to figure out, okay, so how do we exactly get tickets for DawgNation Appreciation? We've tried to make it for you as simple as we can. Just go to DawgNation.com. At the very top of the page at DawgNation.com, there is a banner right there that you can click into. The DawgNation Appreciation banner at the top of DawgNation.com gets you right in there. There are some premium tickets, which include autograph items. There are general admission tickets that start at just $49. We've already been sort of talking about some of the special things that are going to be going on that night. As I said, we've got even more to kind of add to the festivity list before it all gets there. Thursday, March 15th is going to be a cannot-miss day for DawgNation Appreciation, and I am so excited about spending that night and that evening with so many of you as well. And by the way, some of you have asked, at any point in time, are we going to give away any tickets here on DawgNation Daily for DawgNation Appreciation? I think the answer to that question is yes, and we'll look forward to kind of talking to you some more about that in the days ahead. We've got Jeff Sintel coming up. We'll do a little UGA recruiting talk with him. Before we get to that, though, one of the issues that we'll actually get to with Jeff when he's on the phone with us in a couple of minutes is the fact that Georgia, and quite, frankly, one of the most centerpiece recruits for Georgia's 2019 class is the five-star defensive end, the big-time pass rusher, Nolan Smith. Now, you know the Nolan Smith story if you follow Georgia recruiting closely. He is one of the leaders of this class for Georgia, but also a guy that's not afraid to take visits and not afraid to sort of flirt a little bit with some other programs. He's been seen on social media wearing the hats of Clemson, the hat of Ohio State from time to time. He's, been seen wearing the Alabama gear before, and he actually took a visit to Alabama over the weekend here. And Chris Kirschner, our colleague from SECCountry.com, actually did a good job of catching up with Nolan Smith to sort of talk about the visit. And one of the things that in the piece at SEC Country that Kirschner gets to, and I'll put a link to this at DawgNation.com, he kind of talks about Nolan Smith's feelings about Tosh Lapoy and what Lapoy means to Nolan Smith, why he likes him. But then at the end of that piece, and if you're watching on video, you can see this. If you're listening to the show, I'll read it to you. At the end, he kind of gets into his commitment status here, and here's where things get a little bit interesting for Nolan Smith in Georgia. Chris Kirschner quotes Nolan Smith here. I'm going to read from Chris and Nolan. He says, Alabama's made a dent in Georgia's grasp on Smith. This is Chris Kirschner writing. How would he classify chances of flipping him? Nolan Smith says, it's a big chance. Both teams were just in the national championship. Alabama has a great squad, great group of guys. They are known to put outside linebackers in the NFL. And then Chris Kirschner's question back to him is, would you consider yourself 100% committed to UGA? Nolan Smith's answer, that's undisclosed. Chris Kirschner then asks, Why that answer? Nolan Smith says that's undisclosed too. So Nolan Smith not really willing to, at least to the Alabama reporters, say I'm 100% committed to Georgia. Is this a reason for Georgia fans to be concerned? My belief is no. My belief is the thing with Nolan Smith here is still very much like what we talked to Jaden Hazelwood about when Hazelwood was with us at the Marlowe's event not too long ago. Hazelwood, just like Nolan Smith, is a 5-star. And Hazelwood, just like Nolan Smith, is a guy who likes to take his visits and likes to sort of enjoy the recruiting process. Hazelwood was just at Florida over the weekend, and Hazelwood sort of laid out then his philosophy, this is from back in Marlowe's a couple of weeks ago, about kind of why he still travels around even if he's fully committed to Georgia. Here is 5-star wide receiver Jaden Hazelwood.
I'm in the process of scheduling my officials right now. Like, I'm taking my first one in April to Oklahoma, of course. But that doesn't change my opinion on Georgia. Like, I see fans commenting like, someone told me respect the fans and we'll respect you or something like that. And I just looked at it and was like, man, y'all don't understand. You only can do it one time.
Yeah, you can only do it one time. And honestly, I'm with Jaden Hazelwood on this. Now, I'd be devastated as a fan if Hazelwood were to, drop his commitment to Georgia. And I feel the same way about the guy we just got the quotes from at SEC Country, Nolan Smith. I'd be devastated about that as well. But ultimately, I don't think there's any reason for devastation here. Nolan Smith's talking to a reporter that covers Alabama. I think it's only natural that the words that come out of his mouth may be colored a little bit in the pro-Alabama direction. Jaden Hazelwood takes his visits. That's not something for me to really sweat much either. I think when it's all said and done, the class of 2019, I think both Smith and Hazelwood are all dog, and for Georgia fans, that should probably be the only thing that matters. It's good to have you with us here today on DawgNation Daily. For more on these subjects and more, let's get ready to welcome in Jeff Sintel.
From Athens and across the SEC or wherever the recruiting trail may lead, here's a DawgNation.com insider.
So Jeff Sintel, by now here on DawgNation Daily, you kind of know how all of this works. When there's good recruiting news for Georgia, obviously we're the sort of first to sort of jump up and down and sort of trumpet that. When there's also maybe somewhat confusing and concerning news, we're also kind of paying attention to that as well. As you might imagine, when a guy like Nolan Smith, who we believe to be one of the real centerpieces for Georgia's 2019 class, and me personally believe still going to be solidly all dog, no matter how many visits he takes between now and then, when he goes to Alabama and talks up Tosh Lapoy, when he goes to Alabama and sort of sidesteps the opportunity to announce that he's 100% committed to Georgia, that's going to raise an eyebrow from some of our viewers and listeners, and it's probably the kind of thing we want to bring up with you here today. So as I say good morning to you, I'll give you the floor to sort of give your thoughts on Nolan Smith visiting Alabama and the impressions that campus visit seemed to leave on him.
Hey, good morning, Brandon. The sun is up today. I would say, let me see how I can couch this one. Nolan's a tremendous player. I think he's one of the top 5 guys that are either signed or committed to Georgia right now. Tremendous player. He's going to take his visits. He's earned every right to do so. It will probably only be with the upper echelon of college football, but I don't know. I would probably worry. I would probably counsel DawgNation to worry about Nolan going to an Alabama or anywhere else other than Georgia. Like I would tell them to worry about you starting up a Gator Nation Daily podcast, even sponsored by a Brinks truck full of money by Gatorade. That's probably where I would put that one right now.
Yeah, I certainly understand where you're kind of coming from on that, because, the one thing that you've pointed to when it comes to Nolan Smith so much in the past is this is a guy that, he continues to recruit for Georgia. And ultimately, it's those kinds of actions that are probably more, I think, demonstrative of what Smith's future is, more so than a few kind words for some folks who played host to him over the course of a weekend, right?
That's just being a Southern gentleman from Savannah. He's respecting the hospitality of Tuscaloosa. Got a chance to talk up to some national championship level coaches. I would say, if you want to look for Nolan Smith weather patterns, I think it was either last night or this morning on Twitter. There's the impressive back squat by Kearis Jackson, 405 pounds, 5 times. It looks like he's got an entourage in the weight room urging him on during that rep. And Nolan Smith kind of just happened to quote tweet that rep and said, "That's my dog," DAWG. So I would pay more attention at this point what Nolan says to other recruits. compared to his thoughts on other teams.
Yeah, Jeff, I think that's well said. And I'm assuming you're going to say the same thing about, well, you have a trio of Georgia commits, Jaden Hazelwood, Jalen Perry, Luke Griffin, all visit Florida over the weekend. You know, we played audio a moment ago of what Jaden Hazelwood told both of us when he was with us at one of our Marlowe's events a few weeks ago, that, you know, he's going through this process just one time in his life. He's going to enjoy it. I don't have any doubts about, you know, Hazelwood any more than I have any doubts about Nolan Smith. And frankly, I don't really have any criticism of these guys who want to take these visits. And by the way, you know how hard that is for me to say when the visit is actually to Gainesville, actually to Florida. That's the place I'd sort of least want you to visit. But in the case of these guys, I'm still going to have the same attitude towards Hazelwood and Jalen and Luke Griffin that I'm going to have towards Nolan Smith. You know what? Go out and enjoy yourself. You know, go out there and, you know, see the world if you can, you know, or at least maybe Gainesville, Florida, if not the rest of the world. You know, go out and enjoy that. You know, for me, the Hazelwood visit to Florida is no different than the Nolan Smith visit to Alabama, and I'm guessing you probably feel the same way.
Yeah, you got my mind stirring there, Brandon. I'm sitting here going, what would be rated as the stronger commitment here? Nolan Smith to Georgia or Jaden Hazelwood to Georgia? That would be a good one, because I think both of those have some titanium alloy, or to sound like a cool cat, some vibranium alloy from Wakanda and the Black Panther strength to them right now. I do remember Jaden Hazelwood telling me that his mama would probably not talk to him for a few days if he ever backed off and backed away from Georgia. So mamas are pretty hard to deal with in the recruiting world. So I would just couch that one up and say that both of those look very, very strong for Georgia right now.
Let me talk to you more about Hazelwood just for a second here, because I believe he's up to number 2 now in the 24/7 Sports composite player ranking for the class of 2019. Obviously, you know what big fans we are of him on DawgNation Daily here. But I want you to do a comparison game for me for a second, and let me see if I can – I know this is an apples to orange deal a little bit, but you know, you look at the excitement level that Georgia fans had for Zamir White back on June 27th when he committed to Georgia's 2018 class, and the hysteria that built up around Justin Fields' eventual announcement when he became the 5-star quarterback for Georgia in its 2018 class. When you start thinking about, you know, how Hazelwood's talent, his skill set matches his position wide receiver to what Fields was as a quarterback, or what Zamir White was as a running back, I mean, how would you compare the sort of uniqueness of Hazelwood's athleticism to those other guys?
Yeah, Hazelwood's a guy that's going to jump out at you. You think about pro player parallels. I think Keenan Allen might be a good one with the San Diego Chargers, but he's just a unique guy. I mean, he's not going to be the graceful acrobat that maybe A.J. Green is. Literally, he could probably be a 5-star safety if that was his trade that he wanted to do. Very driven player, great hands, very physical in the run game, going to block right away when he gets to Georgia. It's kind of funny how Georgia's highest-rated recruit for 2019 is going to be committed for over, I guess it would be 18, 19, 20 months by the time he signs as well with the Bulldogs as well. But Hazelwood's the guy. I can remember him. I think back to this time last year, we were kind of thinking about his commitment video and talking about his commitment video, and he was already really very eager by, I think, late January to get work on that and start working on that. And it took some time to make sure we got everything the right way, and he was really eager to get that commitment out to the world. So, you know, Jaden's a guy that's going to make a lot of plays. He's just so big and long and rangy. He's the type of guy that Justin Fields got to know very well on the 7-on-7 circuit. I think there's a catch he made last year. I believe it was at Shiloh High School that I think 7-on-7 coaches and trainers will be talking about for years to come. Made it in some weather elements. Those two, you know, Justin and Jaden have a very good rapport together. He's just going to be, I think, in which he should be. This is not breaking news here, but he should be an instant impact player for Georgia's receiving corps once he arrives in Athens.
Let me make one more point about Hazelwood here real quick, because you obviously see, you know, you're on the recruiting trail all the time, so you see a lot of these guys, all these guys, you know, on the field in action, face-to-face a lot. I don't get to see them face-to-face quite as much as you do. When we interviewed Hazelwood at Marlowe's a couple of weeks ago, the first thing that sort of caught my attention is because you described him as long and rangy, because he does have the sort of the tall body, the long arms. You almost anticipate seeing him and expect him to look maybe a little bit skinny. You think about high school athletes who are oftentimes tall. They don't have, necessarily much of a frame. One of the things I was impressed with Hazelwood, though, is and I'm not a scout. I'm not trying to pretend to be one, but I was impressed that, for a guy that's a little taller, that's got the long frame, he's got a little bit. He's working with a little bit more beef than I sort of expect him to be already. And this is, getting ready to go into his senior year of high school, and obviously Georgia wants, physical receivers, guys who can block, and Hazelwood's already good at that. He brings a little more physicality than you might expect from a tall, rangy, long receiver. He sort of almost defies that body type with the physicality, with the way that he plays. Is that something that you would agree with?
Yeah, I think you look at just the strict measurables there, and he's packed on some weight. I know he works out all the time. Definitely a kid that's not into the foolishness or the dog and pony show of recruiting. He kind of told me the last time we chatted about it, he didn't expect to go to the opening because that kind of wasn't his thing, and that's very interesting considering he would have been the top 5 players there. But Hazelwood's a guy. I think he really works. He really cares about his routes. But then if you look at just the player profile here, I think by the time he arrives in Athens, he will be a freshman, January of 2019, I believe, and I think he's going to be a guy. I think he's going to be a guy that will probably be no worse than the 3rd or 4th biggest receiver on Georgia's roster once he immediately, gets into the program and everything else. He'll probably be about maybe 6'3.5", maybe getting close to 6'4", and he'll probably weigh about 205 pounds by the time he's in Athens. And when he goes and gets the ball, the physical way he plays the game, he was an asset in the punt return game for Cedar Grove as well. He was so shifty and elusive. Had the agility there as well. I mean, there's a reason why that guy is rated so highly as he is. I guess he's an All-American, an Adidas All-American maybe now, the way that the branding of that game goes. And Hazelwood's another guy. If you look on a very interesting feature they have, and maybe this is a really good barometer to share with everybody. 24/7 Sports also has a feature on their site where they track the ratings of all the commits coming out of high school all time when they chose Georgia. And I think Hazelwood is still clearly in the top 5 in terms of all-time ratings of guys that have committed to Georgia. And I think that's probably the best way to put a button on that synopsis right there.
I liked your profile of 4-star offensive tackle Amari Kite, and I liked it for 2 reasons, Jeff. First of all, I love the idea. We've done on DawgNation Daily the last couple of days a lot of Georgia versus Alabama stuff, some of the things that maybe Georgia said about Alabama, some of the things that maybe Alabama said about Georgia. This would appear to be a budding rivalry both on the field and in recruiting. So, therefore, I love the idea of Georgia going into the Yellowhammer State to get an offensive lineman where that to happen. I think that's a lot of fun. But, we also talked when you were with us on Friday about how hard it is to find true tackles, guys that are not guards, that actually project as tackles at the college level. Kite would certainly seem to be one of those guys. I was hoping you might expound a little bit more about what you wrote on with him, because those were the 2 thoughts that sort of jumped to mind for me when I read your Centel Intel piece.
Yeah, Amari Kite. First of all, let's just set the table on the degree of difficulty here. Let's put all the 45s on the bar. This is a young man from Thompson High School, just south of Birmingham. A neat little side story there is they just opened a brand new school in that community. It only checked in at a price tag of $88 million.
Whoa.
Something to think about there. Now, he plays for the Thompson Warriors, and Alabama has offered. Alabama's clocking him hard. Auburn has offered. Auburn is clocking him hard, as well as LSU, Oklahoma, Tennessee, schools like that. But he really had a good visit to Georgia over the weekend. He said Sam Pittman was very straight up and honest with him. He said, "You would not be here if we were not seriously interested in you." He said Pittman told him that he is clearly a tackle, the way the Georgia Bulldogs view him as a prospect. And Sam Pittman being Sam Pittman, there's always a funny story. You don't have to dig too deep to find it. And Pittman told Kite that he would do a somersault. I believe it's a somersault. If Kite ever decided to come play his football in Athens. Kite liked it. You got to watch this one little trendsetter right here. He had his mom and dad with him. along the visit as well. They got to talk a little bit about academics. Kirby Smart even spoke to him and said, well, they're going to recruit him hard and they wanted him bad. And those are all very good things to think about when you try to figure out tackles and where Georgia, how many they might get. I think my information right now leads me to believe that Georgia will take at least 2. Who are the top 2? Great questions there. I would probably put Kite up there. I would also put a gentleman by the name of Wanye Morris at Grayson High School into that mix as well as tackle. But Georgia, if they like a guy, they might even extend out to 3. Even though they've kind of shocked a little bit at tackle over the last few years. But when you sit there and you look at legitimate players for Georgia on the offensive line who could start multiple years at Georgia, I still think there's a lot more guards than there are tackles. There may be only 3 tackles that are currently in the program that could really get it done in the SEC, maybe 4.
There's also a lot of running backs on the roster right now, but that didn't stop Georgia from hosting Noah Cain, the big-time running back from IMG Academy, over the weekend. And I guess, Jeff, speaking of Alabama, what this sort of brings to mind to me is, Chris Kirshner, who covers Alabama recruiting for SEC Country, was with us here, back last summer during the Zamir White recruitment. And the thing that he said about Alabama at the time was, they don't need a running back, but if they can get a good one, they're still going to try to take him. That's why they were in on Zamir White. That was the only sort of caliber of running back they were looking to take. I think Ohio State was maybe kind of in a similar situation. They were only looking at those elite guys. With Georgia already expecting to have 5 scholarship running backs in the roster, but Noah Cain, being entertained this weekend, you had some great quotes from Noah at DawgNation.com. Is this also the kind of the same thing of Georgia doesn't need a running back? It doesn't have to take one, but if you can get a guy like Cain or someone of that caliber at that point in time, you got to try to find some room. Is that kind of the situation there?
Yeah, and that's kind of not just what the coach speak sounds like there regarding Georgia and running backs, because of course the coaches at any school will draft up a very enviable pitch to any running back, especially one as talented as Noah Cain. But consider this for a moment. DeAndre Swift, I believe, is the type of player that might be hear the NFL calling by the end of his junior year. And at the most, Brian Harrion and Elijah Holyfield only have 2 more seasons at Georgia. So by the end of 2019, guess how many running backs will be left at the University of Georgia? The number potentially, if Swift goes pro after his junior year, and by all indications he's got a future, he's got the potential to think that way.
Yeah.
That would be just Zamir White and James Cook.
Sure.
So they would just be two stud backs in the stable. And I know the magic number for Georgia or any program in the SEC that likes to run the rock the way Georgia does, have that pro style set, is they need to have at least 5. So when I start crunching those numbers and you start looking at what if Elijah Holyfield has a gangbusters year, then he might be a candidate to also jump to the next level as well. So I do think Georgia's going to take at least 1 running back this year, and in the right circumstances that kind of fall in line, they might even take 2.
That's really interesting. By the way, to close out our conversation here, you had mentioned a moment ago Kearis Jackson's performance. Scott Sinclair had this on Twitter of Jackson really kind of getting after it in the weight room. I think if you're watching us on Facebook Live, we'll be able to show this to you. So he's kind of getting after it in the weight room there. And, what that kind of brought to mind for me, Jeff, is, and I know Kearis well, you certainly covered him terrifically kind of leading up to his enrollment at Georgia as a part of the 2018 class. He was such a leader for Georgia in terms of recruiting. He was that guy who was the sort of we ain't done yet guy on Twitter, who was always sort of like, coaxing on the next recruit to come into the class. He was one of the most outspoken members of Georgia's 2018 class, and here he is seemingly kind of carrying on that same leadership into the weight room as well. I mean, kind of give me your thoughts on Kearis here as an early enrollee, apparently, at least based on this one small snippet from a Scott Sinclair video, making the most of his opportunity to get an early start on his college career. Could you expect to hear some things from Kearis here this spring and maybe set himself up to maybe be in that sort of Isaiah McKenzie role some on the field in 2018, or is that saying too much too soon?
We need to see what he can do, especially in the spring football setting. But I think Kearis, he's bouncing back from an injury that cost him, I believe it was an elbow injury that cost him the last few games of his senior year. And obviously we could extrapolate to say if a healthy Kearis Jackson was with Peach County on that crazy end to that football game in the Mercedes-Benz Stadium, then perhaps the Georgia High School Association would have had a lot fewer headaches and a lot fewer called board meetings in the aftermath of that game, my friend. But Kearis is a guy I'm going to watch because Kearis is a guy who's really fast. He's kind of known as that fast guy. But two stories stick out. Number one is he's just immensely strong. Even for a Peach County kid, as that Twitter video displays. But remember, he won the state shot put championship. Think about that for a moment. When Notori Johnson was a senior at Cedar Grove, I'm talking about all 335, 40 pounds of them, Kearis Jackson threw the shot put farther than Notori Johnson and a lot of dudes in order to win the state title in the shot put. I think he's immediately going to be one of Georgia's better blockers, and he's immediately going to be one of Georgia's faster and stronger receivers. Wonder how that rehab and that recovery from his injury is going to work out. I think it will be fine. And Kearis is a guy, I think his playing time, I wonder who's going to be the other guy in the rotation. Is it going to be Crumpton, who makes a bold move this year and gets a lot of those looks that maybe Isaiah McKenzie did? Or will it be a maybe bigger version of Isaiah McKenzie with a guy like Kearis? Or maybe it's James Cook seeing a lot of those roles again. And another very talented athlete with great vision, cutting ability, instincts as well. It seems like Georgia is loading up. Well, Georgia just has loaded up with lots of multiple impactful game breakers at every position.
The good news, Jeff, is we got a long time to kind of figure all this out. We're still a few weeks away from the start of spring practice, and obviously still a good ways away from September, but it's going to be fun to watch all this unfold as Georgia starts to rebuild its offense here for 2018. Thanks so much for your time here on DawgNation Daily. Jeff, we'll look forward to catching the Intel blog when it's posted later on this evening over at DawgNation.com, and we'll talk to you again soon.
Hey, Brandon, a good topic for the rest of your show. Quiz your audience. Get them to tell you where Georgia doesn't have at least two quality players at every position heading into 2018. That might take a minute.
That's a pretty provocative question, Jeff. Thanks a lot.
Hey, bud.
Let's take a look around the rest of the league. This is SEC Through.
Jeff, always programming the content. That's what you like about Jeff Sintel, even at the end there, sort of dropping that nugget to sort of, create the conversation. If you want to weigh in on that with me on Twitter at DawgNation Daily or in our comment section, either watching it live on Facebook Live or when we post the podcast at DawgNation.com. Certainly love to kind of hear from you on that. That really is the name of the game. It is about that, that ability to, stockpile multiple quality players at every position. And you do sort of look at, with all due respect, what Alabama's been able to do is establish a scenario where you need virtually a perfect roster to win a national championship, even compete for national championships, because Ohio State's not going anywhere. And people don't like Urban Meyer, but the truth is that's still a incredibly talented program. If there was no Alabama, we'd be amazed at how much 4- and 5-star talent resides there in Columbus, Ohio. That's a program that Georgia's going to have to tussle with in the future as well if it wants to win national championships along the same lines as Clemson. So Jeff's question that he asked there at the end is, for the most part, right. You really can't find too many position groups where you don't have at least two really good guys. But unfortunately, when it comes to winning national championships, you need all of them. You need great guys really everywhere. You can't afford to have any holes anywhere. All right, SEC Through time here on on DawgNation Daily with SEC Country Live coming up at 3 p.m. Eastern time on the SEC Country Facebook page. Let me also remind you real quick here as well. At DawgNation Appreciation on Thursday, March 15th, one of the cool things that we are going to do is announce the winner. Someone is going to be going with a pair of tickets to every game in Athens this upcoming fall. All the football games there in Athens. We're going to announce the winner that night at DawgNation Appreciation. So that's maybe another reason for you to be with us in the building there Thursday, March 15th at the Coca-Cola Roxy Theater. We are really excited about that. All right, Alabama stuff here to start the SEC through. AL.com has a story that, on off-field analysts, not on-field coaches, it's been kind of a sort of a new rave here in the world of the SEC. And one of the ways that Nick Saban has used these roles is to rehabilitate some careers. That's where Lane Kiffin started before he ultimately became offensive coordinator. That's where Steve Sarkisian started before he ultimately became, at least for one game, Alabama's offensive coordinator, then off to work for the Atlanta Falcons. There have been some other guys there in that spot who, maybe they were a little bit dinged up, based on how they'd performed at their last job, both in some cases on and off the field. The analyst role has been a way for them to kind of clean up their reputation a little bit. There was some thought that maybe that might be the next landing spot for Hugh Freeze. Maybe still will be, but it's just not going to happen in 2018. Another guy apparently maybe making use of this car wash, so to speak, is former Tennessee coach Butch Jones, because what AL.com is reporting is that Jones is reportedly, and Alabama reportedly, considering kind of marrying themselves to each other in this regard here, where he would become one of these off-field analysts, sort of helping Nick Saban with his weekly game plan preparations, whatever institutional memory and knowledge that a former SEC coach can bring to the table. Alabama may want to use it, and as much as this will be mostly met with punchlines around the SEC, I understand why. Butch Jones is, after all, a walking punchline. The truth is, adding a former head coach in an analyst role is probably always a good idea. The SEC in college football and the NCAA, they limit the number of guys you can sign in any given year. They limit the number of scholarship players you can have at one time. They limit the number of total coaches you can have on your staff at one time. The areas in which the NCAA does not have limitations, that's what the best programs are going to exploit. Paying a lot of money to retain really good coaches, the good programs are going to do that. Hiring an army of analysts to get whatever advantage they can during the season, the good program's going to do that. So Butch Jones is a punchline, but Alabama hiring him is probably no laughing matter. Speaking of Alabama, have you noticed all the changes afoot there in Tuscaloosa? There have been a few lately. At the end of last week, you had Burton Burns kind of moving from an on-field coaching role into an off-field coaching role. No real explanation as to why. You've got some Alabama officials who had not been on Twitter before. All of a sudden, they're popping up on Twitter now. You've got a recruiting office person being replaced. Nick Saban feeling the heat here a little bit, not number one in recruiting anymore, coming off 2018. Maybe he's realigning his staff priorities and realigning some of his staff members to make a better run at things here in 2019. That's the only guess I can make on that. I did think it was funny, shifting our attention to basketball here just for a moment. On SEC Country Live yesterday, we showed the video of the Florida students throwing the money and chanting FBI at Auburn as it was walking off the floor there, and Bruce Pearl, some of the Auburn players had collected that money, and Bruce Pearl sort of self-reported the money that had gotten collected, which is kind of a clever thing for Pearl to do, and another example of, to some people, he may be an unsavory figure, but he is, for the most part, a guy that understands how to generate some headlines and attention. You got to give him credit for that. By the way, one more quick story. We'll do more of this on SEC Country Live this afternoon. Paul Feinbaum, in speaking SEC Country, has said that he believes that the coach in the hottest seat in the SEC for 2018 is LSU's Ed Orgeron. Will Orgeron get fired? I don't believe so, but he certainly needs to win soon. We'll make that your SEC through. As we wrap up here today on DawgNation Daily, a couple things I want to remind you of. First of all, as we've been telling you, Thursday, March 15th, DawgNation Appreciation comes up. Would love for you to be a part of that. Go to DawgNation.com. There's a banner right there at the top of the page. You can be a part of the evening, which includes Nick Chubb, Sony Michel, Roquan Smith, three of the great players in the history of Georgia football going to be there that night. You can get your tickets and be a part of it too, including premium tickets that offer some autograph opportunities from either Chubb, Michelle, or Roquan. Going to be a really fun night. Also, make sure you check out both our show page at DawgNation.com. We post this show, or the forum at forum.DawgNation.com. We'll have the DawgNation Daily Double posted with a reaction to the five-star point guard's decommitment from Georgia basketball. So much more there for that, the DawgNation Daily Double. Make sure you check that out today for additional content. And, of course, here on DawgNation Daily, we believe that good Georgia fans are Gator haters first and foremost. And 242 days from right now, Georgia beats Florida again. It's our Gator Hater Countdown. Thanks for being with us today. And on video, thank you all for being with us as well. Let's get ready to get some of your comments here. We'll be able to knock some of these out. Anything you want to talk about when it comes to today's show, or anything going on with Georgia football, Georgia athletics, we can kind of do it all. Although I guess some of you would say, please keep the basketball talk to the Daily Double, and we will do that. Ryan Bray says, is there going to be a live feed for the DawgNation Appreciation? Ryan, that's a great question. We are not going to be able to offer a live feed for the event. A, we want to be fair to the folks who are in the building there that night, and B, anytime that you're in, a concert venue like this, which is very much like what the Coca-Cola Roxy Theater is, there is that degree of it's just a very different kind of thing. It's not like being at a Marlowe's or a Kroger, place like that we've been before. There's some contractual issues you kind of have to go through here, and contractually, we're not going to be able to stream the event live. So the way to see the event, and by the way, we won't even be able to rebroadcast it later, just because of that's the agreement you kind of have to make when you do an event like this. The only way to see the event, there's going to be some really cool stuff. I've been working a lot on this, a whole team of folks working a lot on this. There is some really cool stuff that you're going to be able to see that night that you'll only be able to see there that night. That's one of the reasons why we're encouraging anybody who can to be with us Thursday, March 15th for our DawgNation Appreciation right there at the Battery Atlanta. at the beautiful venue, which is the Coca-Cola Roxy Theater. Al Chandler says, any injury updates? Nothing new for me, although we're certainly watching to see, in cases like D'Angelo Gibbs and, issues like that, how soon he gets back on the Georgia, the front here for Georgia. We're certainly looking forward to seeing that. Joey Waddell says, can Nate McBride take over for Roquan Smith this year? I think that certainly Nate McBride is much more a part of the Georgia linebacking core this season. He's going to have a real chance to earn some playing time. But, and I know that there are always people who disagree with me when I say this in the comment section, and frankly, that's one of the reasons why we have the comment section. So there can be sort of open flow of ideas, and different people can express different things. My opinion's not the only one that matters, but my opinion is asking Nate McBride to, quote, be the next Roquan Smith right now is probably asking a little much from McBride, who didn't play much linebacker during his freshman season. I think there's a collection of linebackers that probably help contribute for Georgia. I personally believe that in terms of who you count on more this upcoming season, it may well be Monty Rice more so than Nate McBride because of a couple things here. Rice went through spring practice last year. That gave him a leg up. Rice is a pretty physical run-stuffing guy. That's a good way to get on the field. McBride may still have a terrific career at Georgia, but in terms of who you count on 2018, for me, might be Rice a little more than Nate McBride there in that regard. Randy Hall says, how about a broadcast on incoming preferred walk-ons? That might be an interesting thing to do, although I guess I'd probably have to do a little research to make sure I did that. Miriam Martin Corbin referencing something that Colin Cowherd said. I didn't see what Colin said, so y'all have to tell me about it because I missed it. And if it was in the comment section earlier, I certainly missed that. Holly Hightower's back with us. She says her gallbladder surgery was a little more complicated than expected. Had to be opened up. Home from the hospital now, feeling pretty good. Extended time off from work and listen to DawgNation Daily Live. Hey, Holly, I appreciate you listening. I hope we're helping with your recovery there a little bit. Hope I'm not saying anything to increase your pain. We're really glad that you're here and hope that your recovery continues to go well. Thanks so much. I guess Colin Cowherd is accusing an SEC team of paying its football players. I mean, listen, if I thought for 1 second that Colin Cowherd knew anything about anything, I would, be a lot more worried about that. Now, do I think that Colin Cowherd has a job to do? I clearly do. And his job is to obviously generate attention and generate conversation. I mean, listen, before I did DawgNation Daily Sports Radio was the way that I sort of, grew up in media world. That was the first job I really had in this industry, and I still have a lot of affection for sports radio. I like the idea of the host who kind of comes in, gives the provocative opinion, and gets people stirred up and gets people going. I haven't seen, in particular, the substance of Cowherd's statement here, but I always err on the side of, is this a guy trying to get people talking, or is this a guy reporting something? And Colin Cowherd's not a reporter. What he quote unquote heard is not substantial enough to actually qualify as news. Now, when a host says that, does that turn into a conversation of how many similarities are there between what's going on in football and what's going on in basketball? At that point in time, that's the job of the radio host to sort of take the news that's out there, the FBI investigation of basketball, spin that forward into the next thing, and obviously some suspicions about football is the next part of that. But I don't believe there's any, obviously, I don't believe that Colin Cowherd has any evidence to support that. And B, here's the other thing. If there was a big-time SEC school who was doing some of the same stuff in football that some of these basketball teams have done, I can promise you this, you'll never hear about it. You'll never hear about it because big-time college football is too much of a business for anybody to bring it to its knees. So I'm not even going to openly speculate what I think is going on in football. It's not really for me to say because I obviously don't know. But what I'm pretty sure I do know is that the football machine is going to keep right on spinning. So I don't know that there's too much reason to worry about any of that kind of stuff. Jonathan Searcy also kind of thinking about some of the things that Cowherd said about Georgia that ended up being wrong. Mickey Brady, let me hit his comment about the Android thing. He says, I listen every day on an Android Stylo 2, and it's clear as a bell. BA from Douglas, Georgia, where we love DawgNation Daily. Mickey, that's incredibly nice of you to say. Thank you so much. And I'm really glad to know that that the Android users are well taken care of. That is really good to hear. That's really nice. Some of y'all know, and some of you have been incredibly patient with me, because for someone who sort of does sort of a semi-techie job, I mean, the idea of being on Facebook Live and doing podcasts and these kinds of things are sort of technologically at least based. I'm not the most techie type guy in the world. Don't really know anything about the Android devices whatsoever. Know about Apple Podcasts, because that's the way that I also listen to DawgNation daily when I want to check it out, to just kind of hear what's going on. So for those of you who kind of bring me up to speed, I certainly appreciate that. Joe Rush says, BA, openly speculate. That's what we're all here for. Yeah, that is a good point. We do seem to turn our comment sections and our sort of candid video comments into a little open speculation from time to time. That is certainly true. Easy Brown says, the NCAA should pay the players. Call it a stipend for whatever or whatever you want. Just pay the players. The NCAA makes billions off these players. They sell jerseys with the player's name on it. Come on, man. All right, so I partially agree with Easy, except I partially disagree with him. If you want to know like my overarching opinion on all this, whether it includes men's basketball or football or whatever, I am not necessarily in favor of the NCAA, quote, paying the players. Although would I like for every player in every sport to get as much of a stipend as they possibly could to sort of, just pay expenses? Yeah, I'd be fine with that. I'm not against more sort of stipend related, activity from the NCAA, more cost of living sort of enhancements from the NCAA. I'm not against any of that kind of stuff. But what I'm truly in favor of is this: just sort of basic capitalism. I think that it's one thing if you go volunteer to play at a major NCAA university, to say that school doesn't have an obligation to pay you. I guess that's probably fine. But what I don't think is fair, what I don't think should be legal, is that in doing so, you surrender your right to market your likeness. And that for me is however it can be marketed. Autograph signings, making appearances at auto dealerships, or whatever. I think your name, your, quote, celebrity status belongs to you. And frankly, if an agent wants to pay, like the one story that seems to be going on in Arizona, where there was a payment funnel of $100,000 to a player who's going to end up making a gazillion dollars in the NBA. I mean, I watched this guy play some Saturday against Oregon. I'm sure some of the folks that run our show, Mike, I'm sure that they've all seen him a million times. This guy is fantastic looking. I mean, this guy is a good looking player. The idea that you could get his services for a year for $100,000 is a total bargain. And I don't think there's anything wrong with this player getting that $100,000, from the age. It's his likeness. It's the same way that the Olympics, for the most part, operate. What I do think is immoral, and after this, I'll get off my high horse. What I do think is immoral is for football players to put their life on the line every single Saturday and risk injury, in some cases even debilitating injury, and the money that their efforts generates, for the most part, ends up going to fund other sports. That to me is unfair. That to me is frankly unseemly. That's the kind of thing that when you talk about what sort of sparks a bit of moral outrage, I think it's immoral that football players risk their lives so other sports can fly across the country and pretend that they're big time. That's what I find to be a little bit immoral. Richard Smith says he agrees. It's almost like the NCAA, quote, owns people. I mean, that there's certainly a reason why an analogy like that might work. Joe Rush, who lives in Atlanta just like me, says DeAndre Ayton, that's the Arizona kid, is trending towards our last place Atlanta Hawks. I haven't followed the Tankapalooza in the NBA that closely this year, and I don't quite know my NBA mock draft stuff too well yet. But based on what I saw from Ayton on Saturday, I'd take him on the Hawks in a heartbeat. Tyler Jenkins says he never thought about it being that easy when it comes to the NCAA issues. He says that's a good point. Tyler, thanks for weighing in. Miriam Martin Corbin agrees as well. Kentrolis Tyson brings up Riley Ridley's name. And, that is one of those guys that as we get closer to spring and we start focusing in on, hey, listen, we always kind of do the same thing. We're going on year 3 of covering Georgia spring practice. I don't know that we're going to reinvent the wheel. We always sort of gravitate towards, who are those next guys to take the big step forward? Who are those next guys to sort of, establish themselves? And, had the outcome of the national championship game had gone differently, I think Riley Ridley is viewed, and that's not an easy name for me to say. Riley Ridley, it will sort of always be a little bit of a tongue twister for me. But I think that Riley Ridley's one of those guys that would have been viewed really differently. One of those guys that, would be thought of as maybe a bit of a breakout star. And just because Georgia ended up losing that game, I don't think that should obscure Ridley's performance from the game. Now, I'm not going to tell you that he's going to truly, go out and have, some sort of monster year. The fact of the matter is, Georgia's still going to run the football a lot, and a lot of these guys are going to get fewer catches than we sort of want them to. Ridley's probably among that group. But, you look at some flashes from 2016, you look at the Alabama game from the end of the 2017 season, maybe there's a chance to think that Riley Ridley could kind of emerge there. And you look at that, we talked about Kearis Jackson with Jeff Sentell earlier, but you look at that real trio of receivers that you expect to get the lion's share of the touches, McCole kind of working out of the spot. I'm assuming Ridley on one of the outside sides. And then, then Terry Godwin some too, although I guess Godwin could also slide into the middle there as well. One way or another, that probably ends up being your 3 big receivers next season, right? Make a case for J.J. Holloman maybe. I think Trey Blunt's going to be on the field a lot because of how physical he is, and also because of the fact that he's probably an underrated receiver. I'm talking about catching the football as well. But certainly, when you think about that trio that's sort of above the rest, it would seem like that McCole and Godwin, and I would say that Ridley has a really strong chance to be the third there. Charlie Warner says, Charlie Warner. Joel Moody, talking about Charlie Warner, says that he was coming on until his injury as well. Yeah, what do you have, 5 catches in the Rose Bowl? I was rewatching that Rose Bowl game a little bit last night for a reason, and you go back and just see how many balls Warner's hauling in that day. Michael Morrow also bringing up the name Matt Landers. That's another one to think about there as well. Philip Jordan Wells says Holloman might start, and he very well might. I still think that for me, Holloman is not in that sort of Dominic Blaylock, Jaden Hazelwood category of prospects, but a pretty good prospect who I think you're still going to hear a lot too. Chad Clark says Justin Fields to Riley Ridley could be amazing. Chad's going to get people stirred up by saying that. I'm not even. Hey, listen, I think Georgia's got 2 good quarterbacks, but anytime you sort of go on the record and with one in favor of the other, there's going to be some folks getting stirred up about that. Hasheem Spike says Ridley and Hardman are going to be big time in 2018. Yeah, I believe they might be. Al Chandler says, will we see less tight end passes in 2018 and 2019? Al, what this reminds me of is, and I tried to make this point on DawgNation Daily the other day, and I frankly don't know that I did it all that effectively. There was this piece from Ian Boyd, who's like this X's and O's writer. And y'all know I don't pretend to be a former coach. I'm not a former player. What I know about X's and O's is what I read from other people. I'm just going to be, flat honest with you about that. But one of the things he talked about was that, in the modern game, the teams that win national championships are for the most part, teams that use a tight end as that 4th receiving option. That if you're a true spread them out team that doesn't utilize that tight end, you're not winning a national championship. You're just not doing that. There seems to be some evidence to support that. And so what that kind of led me to believe when it comes to Georgia is Georgia, even though Isaac Nada didn't get as many catches as Georgia fans would have liked, although he did catch a touchdown in the SEC championship, and Charlie Warner didn't get as many catches as Georgia fans would like, although he was prolific in the Rose Bowl. Just having these guys on the field actually ends up being value. It ends up being the kind of thing that defenses have to deal with because of the physical component of how they can become an extra blocker for the running game. And in the case of Nada in particular, maybe that's one of the things that's held him back at Georgia a little bit, not fully embracing that part of his role as a true, versatile tight end option. So when the question comes of, will there be less throws to tight ends in 2018 and 2019, my thought is maybe there could be more. But the presence of really good tight ends on the field still gives defenses something to think about. And I don't want to be, sort of overly, I guess, Pollyanna-ish about this, but even if they're not getting catches, they could be making it easier for other offensive contributors to put up some big numbers. It's certainly something to think about. All right, so a really good stuff on the show today. Santiago Diarn says thoughts on Chipper Jones going to the Hall of Fame. Listen, Chipper was one of my guys growing up. He was a rookie in Major League Baseball in my senior year of high school, 1995. And some of y'all know this. When you're like, middle school, high school, I mean, that's the time in your life when sports really means the most to you. And I was watching the Braves every single night. So it's kind of cool to see Chipper going to the Baseball Hall of Fame. Santiago, thanks for bringing that up. All right, but nonetheless, here on DawgNation Daily, we'll be back to talk more Georgia football tomorrow. We appreciate you being with us. SEC Country Live comes up at 3 p.m. Eastern Time this afternoon on the SEC Country Facebook page. Looking forward to doing that show. Looking forward to seeing you all at DawgNation Appreciation on Thursday, March 15th. Speaking of Chipper, right across the street from the brand new Brave Stadium at SunTrust Park there in the Battery, Atlanta at the Coca-Cola Roxy Theater. We're really excited about that. And we're also going to post a podcast here coming up in a couple of minutes. iTunes, SoundCloud. I say iTunes, I really mean Apple Podcasts. Apple Podcasts on Android devices. Available everywhere on Android, apparently. Also, we'll post the show at the world-famous DawgNation.com as well. Y'all have a great day. We'll see you at 10 a.m. tomorrow morning for another episode of DawgNation Daily Live.